to sort of understand a little bit more about where online digital media is going, which my colleague John White will get to, you have to kind of understand what's happened to the news media business. You could say in the last 10 years, but it's really been in the last 4 years that we've seen this huge transformation, and it's turned the business model for media completely upside down. Okay, so what you're seeing here is an ad. It's part of a series campaign that was done by a Turkish newspaper. Anybody speak Turkish? No, I always have to ask because once or twice there have been. Essentially, this was a straight-to-online newspaper, and as you can see, they're having a little bit of fun dancing on the grave of traditional media, and loosely translated, the ad says, "The death of print is coming." They had another really spiffy one, which was a rolled-up newspaper in a hangman's noose. And this, I think, captures, I think, the impression that a lot of people have about what's happening in the news media. Of course, and this is something I'll put on my journalist hat for a moment. One of the great things about being a journalist is that what you typically hear when you first get interested in a story is completely different from the story that you actually uncover. It's one of the great joys of telling stories, is that things are never quite what you think they are, and this is no different. Okay. About 2007, 2008, we'll say up until about August, newspapers were and a lot of other traditional media, including radio and TV, were trying to figure out what online meant. It was becoming more and more popular. I mean, really, if the mainstream media can be credited with anything, it was figuring out the foundation for presenting information online. And that, you have to understand the hours and hours and hours and millions of dollars that went into developing websites and interactive features. I mean, these are all applications for the internet that were driven by a worldwide rush of traditional media to get online, without any idea how we were ever going to make money off it. And so we were, kind of happily going along, whistling by the grave, past the graveyard. And then the recession hit in 2008. And so now we're presented with two distinct but quickly related phenomena. One is that more people are consuming information and more information is online. And all of a sudden, the advertising base, which really allowed us the luxury to experiment with all these things, disappeared. And not because people weren't reading newspapers and newspaper content wasn't important and television network content wasn't important, but because everybody started tightening their belts. And as a result of less ads, newspapers and TV news get smaller, which means that it attracts a smaller audience, and it's a never end. So these two things collide around 2008, and we're still struggling now to figure out really where everything is going. Okay, so how much have things changed? Again, around about the time that our ad revenue goes into the crapper, we find out that, really more and more people are indicating a preference to receive their news online. And really, if I offered you a sandwich and I told you it was $5, and then I said, but this sandwich is free, you know what? You would probably more times than not take the free. And the reason it was free was, again, because we hadn't really figured out the business model of it yet. It took many, many years and hundreds of millions of dollars of litigation to figure out how the music industry was going to profit from being online. And it really only sorted itself out because there was one dominant player in the market that had developed the technology and the devices to impose a solution on the entire world's music industry, Apple. If there hadn't been, so imagine in the media and communications business, there are thousands, tens of thousands of big players around the globe. Everybody has a different idea about how to make online work, and nobody had agreed on anything when these two things collide. Okay. If you want to understand both sort of the ongoing evolution of online news, and as well, just to let you know, there's monitors behind you as well. The Pew Center Research Center is really the place to go for study of mass communication and journalism. It's endlessly fascinating, and it's all research-based, and they don't cut corners, and it's all fantastic. And so what are they telling us? Well, you know, the result of the economic slowdown and the move to online is that newsrooms are 30% smaller than they were in 2000. That's 30% fewer professional journalists producing news. Only 1 in 3 U.S. adults pays for news content anymore. The majority would pay $5 a month, but only 1 in 5 would pay $10 a month. What's interesting is that we sell, you know, lattes here for about $5, and it's a darn good coffee. However, somehow the content that goes into the newspaper, which is the blood, sweat, and tears of several hundred people every day. Like every day we produce an entirely new newspaper. And apparently we can't convince people to pay more than $5 a month for that. And that's a huge problem. Does anybody own their own business here? Small business people? No? Well, let me just say that's not it's not a model for success. Okay. It's also important to understand that, you know, really newspapers in some senses are not actually the most hard hit in all of this. Electronic media have been devastated. It took a little longer for the devastation to occur, but, you know, the cable news channels used to be, year over year, they could count on double-digit increases in their audiences. And starting in 2010, they saw a precipitous drop-off in their audience. As an aside, most traditional media has been offered to you over the years at either free or a highly subsidized price because the people that sell soap and cars and cell phones were paying the freight to produce the news. So all the advertising allowed people to get fairly inexpensive access to news. The price of a newspaper is pennies, fractions of the cost of producing the newspaper. The ads pay for it. The same thing on TV. When viewership and readership go down, we charge less money for our ads. The advertising rates are entirely dependent upon the number of people that are reading or viewing the product. So again, it's not a healthy trend. Okay, the flawed business model. I think I went through most of this. The one thing I want to point out as well, though, is that while people want to consume more information online, you would think that would mean, and growing numbers of people going online, you would think that means that advertising online would be the preferred method for people selling goods and services. And as a result of that, because growing audience and a more acceptable technology platform, we could charge more for it. And in fact, the opposite is true. We get somewhere, it depends on the exact publication, but, you know, we get somewhere between 7 and 25 cents on the dollar for an online ad. And part of the problem is that online advertising is not very effective. People that, especially people who grew up only getting their information online, consider online advertising to be a nuisance. And no one yet, and this is partly what I mean about, we're discussing the evolution of the business model of traditional news. It's very closely related to the evolution of the business model for online, is that nobody has figured out how to make it work online and produce. Right now, online cannot produce revenues to support the newsroom operations of the Winnipeg Free Press. So what I sort of acknowledge is that as online sources become the preferred source, and as we hope a business model evolves that produces more revenue to support journalism, then what we see is it's not really alternative journalism, it's just good journalism. The thing is, it's just going straight to the internet. So it's not so much a change in culture as it is, it's both an acknowledgement that more good information is going online, and more only online publications are getting interested in doing more than just regurgitating stuff that they buy from other content producers.